Just to check again, you can all hear me, right? Everybody can hear me? Everybody can see me? Excellent. This is perfect. Great. By the way, if you do have an echo, it's possible that you have the page open twice. So just check the tabs at the top of your computer. And if you've got more than one tab open, you need to close the others. Keep one open, just one. Okay? Great. Good afternoon, everybody. I can see that people are from lots of different countries, lots of people from Ukraine, lots of people from Russia, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Kazakhstan. It's great to be sharing this talk with you all. As I say, Eugenia, if the sound is echoing, possibly you've got another tab open. You need to close them. Okay? Right. We're talking about life skills. And this talk is a talk which I have done, I think, maybe once before for Ukraine. Also, I've done this in person in Russia, but I know there are a lot of people who are in different places that haven't seen this. In the talk, I will ask you quite a lot of questions. And when I ask you a question, I would simply like you to type in your answer in the chat box, okay? They will be simple questions. We're going to do a funny quiz later on. When I ask a question, just please type in your answer in the box, okay? Now, I'm going to begin with a question about this slide, okay? You can see that this girl is saying what we learn at school is a waste of time. It has nothing to do with life after school. Can you just very quickly type in your answer? Do you agree with what this teenage girl is saying, or do you disagree? Agree or disagree? Can you just type in your answer? Disagree? Yes. Agree? Of course not. Agree? Yes, in some way. Half agree. I like that answer, Mariana. Half agree. That's a very diplomatic answer. And I am the same opinion as Mariana. I would half agree. This was a trick question, of course. It depends, doesn't it? It depends on a lot. Somebody has already mentioned the situation has changed. I think that's very important. I think that education is changing. And maybe when I went to school, it was possible that it was more of a waste of time because maybe what we did was not so connected with day-to-day life. But I think that today education has changed, and it is changing quite a lot at the moment. And I know that in many of the countries that I'm speaking to today, I believe in Ukraine, for example, and I'm sure as well in Russia and other countries, life skills is becoming something which ministries of education feel strongly that we should be including to make sure that we are teaching things that are important for our students. Now, there is a very good book which is called Educating Ruby. There is an interesting quotation here. If you are not a teacher, when was the last time you needed in your real life to solve a quadratic equation? Now, I think this question is a typical question because we learn lots of things that really maybe are not directly relevant to our lives. I don't know. Did you study quadratic equations? If you did you actually use quadratic equations afterwards in your life? Now, these questions are difficult. There is another thing here. It says, have you ever had to remember the capital city of Mongolia? Can anybody tell me the capital city of Mongolia without looking at their iPad or their computer or Google? Lubika is very fast. It's Ulaanbaatar. Now, the question is it useful to learn capital cities by heart when we have iPads? I think, again, it's a trick question. Maybe yes, maybe no. Because maybe indirectly, learning things by heart is useful because we are exercising our memory. But at the same time, it's true that often when we're at school, we learn lots of things that maybe are not so directly relevant to our everyday life. In your everyday life, you don't usually need to know the things which are on this slide, or you could simply find them out by looking at an iPad. Now, the reason why I've started here, I think this is the key to life skills. The question is what we are teaching our students, is it useful in students' lives or not? Now, One group of people who think that what we teach is not useful is this British Chambers of Commerce. You can see at the top, okay? This is the organization that joins together lots of British companies. And there is a statistic in the middle of this slide. Can you see 88%? And it says 88% of companies believe that school leavers are not prepared for work. Now, that's a very high percentage. So they are saying that most of our students, when they leave school, they are not ready for the world of work. And if you see there is a number 57, because it says 50% of companies think that students do not have soft skills such as communication, team working, and resilience. Now, just to explain, soft skills are the same really as life skills. It means they are transferable skills, skills that you use not just in one job, but in any job. Okay. Now, I think that it's important then that we think about these skills. Have our students got good communication skills? Do they know how to work in a team? Now, the British Ministry of Education decided that they needed to make sure that our students are ready for the world of work, and they invented a new subject which is taught in British primary schools and secondary schools. The name of this subject is PSHE education. PSHE is personal, social, health and economic. And the idea here, it says it helps children and young people deal with the real life issues they face as they grow up. The issues that PSHE education covers are central to young people's well-being. Now, that expression, well-being, I think is an important expression. It's something that we want to help our students with so that they feel good and that they are ready for life. Now, I have a serious question for you here. What issues do you think are central to young people's well-being? What skills do they need to know to survive in the 21st century? One thing that we said was communication skills. Can you think of any other things that you think our students need to learn about so that they are ready for life? Right, Daniela has immediately put digital skills. That's a great idea. Flexibility, so they need to be able to adapt to different situations. Natalia has mentioned critical thinking, which is really important. Zana has mentioned creative, which again is very, very important. Resolving conflicts, jobs knowledge, critical thinking, listening skills, okay? Presentations, right? These are all great ideas, and I agree with all of these ideas. These are things that we need to encourage our students to do. And what we're going to look at really in the rest of the session is how we can combine these things with English language classes. Okay, now, while the British government were looking at PSHE education, the European Commission was working on a document which, as it says here, talks about key competences. Key competences, I teach in Spain, and key competences are something which we are legally enforced to include in all subjects in primary and secondary. And as it says here, it describes key competencies as knowledge, skills, and attitudes that will help learners find personal fulfillment and later in life find work and take part in society. You will notice that that expression, personal fulfillment, is very similar to the British PSHE education expression, personal well-being. And I think this is a very important thing. As teachers, we need to worry about if our students are have good well-being and are personally fulfilled. Okay. Now, how does it describe the key competencies? Well, it says that they include traditional skills, such as communication in one's mother tongue, foreign languages, digital skills, literacy, and basic skills in maths and science. Now, I think the really important thing for us is what I've underlined in this slide, foreign languages, because basically this is what we teach. And I always say in this talk, the important thing is that we are teaching English, and so we are immediately teaching a life skill, because in the 21st century, our students need English to do well at school and also to do well after school. Because if our students have English, they have more chances for getting a job, they have more chances for communicating with other people, they have more chances even to find entertainment with films in English, music in English, and we are opening up the world for our students. So I think that's the great thing about being an English teacher, is that we are teaching a life skill. We are teaching a key competence. And when we teach our students vocabulary, when we teach our students the present perfect, we are teaching them something which is essential for their lives, particularly now in the 21st century. It also describes the key competences as horizontal skills, such as learning to learn, social and civic responsibility, initiative and entrepreneurship, cultural awareness, and creativity. Now, I think this is interesting because, again, I think that English is a perfect medium for doing all of these things. For example, a quick question for you here. Do you teach anything that helps your students to learn to learn? Do you teach them any study skills in your English lessons? Do we teach study skills? Yes, and if you're using Gateway, you'll know Gateway First Edition, Gateway Second Edition, we have a section which is study skills. And when we teach a student how to listen effectively, that is useful not just for English, but also in your own language. When we teach a student to predict the content of a reading text from the title and from the illustrations, that is useful not just in English, but for any text. Another question, social and civic responsibility. Do you ever get your students to work in pairs or in groups? I can imagine the answer already, yeah? The answer is of course. And that's one of the great things about English. English is about communication. English is about working in pairs and in groups. And that teaches our students to work in a team and to have responsibility to their partners. Okay, so again, this is very easy for us to include. Another stupid question from me. Do you ever teach cultural awareness in your classes? Any cultural awareness in your classes? The answer is, of course, yes, because when we teach a foreign language, when we teach English, we're obviously teaching directly or indirectly about different people in different cultures and how they think. And our students can compare. If we have a text about studying in the UK, they can compare it with their own country, and we get lots of interesting comparisons. Okay, so cultural awareness, and obviously the last point there, creativity. Somebody said immediately when I asked what is important to teach our students, somebody said creativity. And creativity, I think, is part of every good English language lesson. When we ask interesting questions, when we get students to invent stories, when we get students to invent answers to grammar exercises, we're also encouraging them to be creative. And I think that's why English teachers are great teachers, because we do these things every day. And these things are all part of life skills. Okay, so sometimes I think teachers are afraid of life skills, but we have to realize that actually we are teaching life skills already, and we probably always have been teaching life skills. Now, how can we include life skills? Well, I think that the easiest way to include them is to include them as skills work, the 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We can use life skills as the content for our texts. We can give students interesting texts and useful texts, because we can give them texts about their real life which are useful for them at school, outside school, and for the future. Now, I always show this picture, or 4 pictures. I imagine that everybody knows who these people are. Do we all know them? They're pretty famous. Yeah. Now, this is a trick, of course, because when I used to write books for teenagers, we used to include lots of famous people. And we used to spend a lot of time talking about Madonna and talking about David Beckham because we thought that that was maybe motivating. Now, I think that maybe talking about these people at the beginning of the class may sometimes be motivating, but I don't think anymore I want to have texts about these people in my English language textbook. If students are interested in these people, they can read about them outside. They can find out information on the internet. And I personally don't think that I need to have text in Gateway about these famous people telling people what Justin Bieber's favorite hobby is. One of the reasons for not including this information is because it changes very quickly too. Some people are popular today, and in 2 years, everybody has forgotten them. To be honest, I don't think my teenage students are very interested in Justin Bieber right now. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt are already a little bit old. So these things go changing. I think what we need to do is to include information which is useful and also very motivating and interesting, but that it should be more useful and more valuable in educational terms. Now, the areas that I decided when I started writing Gateway 2nd edition, although many of these things are also in Gateway 1st edition, these were the areas that I thought were important, and you can tell me if you agree that they're important or not. First thing, personal well-being. That includes things like confidence. That includes things like stress. And I think today's teenagers suffer more stress probably than when we were young. So I think that helping students to deal with problems, psychological problems like this, simple questions, is quite easy and important. Physical well-being. Many people feel that today's teenagers aren't very fit. They maybe don't do a lot of exercise. Maybe they eat bad food. So we need to also encourage students to think about looking after themselves and their physical body. Somebody has already mentioned digital skills, and I think this is obvious that we need to make sure that our students have all the necessary digital skills to survive in the 21st century. More and more important. Autonomy and enterprise. Now, by autonomy and enterprise, I mean that students have initiative. When a student is at school, they don't maybe need much initiative because teachers and parents do everything for the students. But I think that when students leave school and begin university, they need to be more autonomous. They need to have independence and to be able to work on their own. So I think that this is something that students need to think about, looking after themselves, okay, and not expecting somebody else to do everything for them. Social skills and citizenship. So obviously working together, helping each other, also thinking about very simple ideas of just basic ideas about society, how people can work together, how important it is to be responsible, to have your rights, but also to have your responsibilities. The world around you, so the environment. I think that everything is getting a little bit catastrophic nowadays. The environment looks bad, and I think it's more important that our teenage students think about their impact on the environment, what they can do to help the environment. Academic skills. Again, students are looked after by us teachers at school, but when a student begins at university, they need to know how to study, they need to know how to be responsible for their own studying. The world of work. So I think we do also need to get students thinking about what they want to do in their future career, the skills that they need in their future career, and as we mentioned before, soft skills, transferable skills that are useful not in one profession, but in many different professions. Numeracy. Now, I think this is more difficult to include in English classes because we don't really do a lot of work with numbers. But I think one thing that we can do is use statistics, diagrams, graphs, and infographics. Now, one reason for doing this is that the Cambridge IELTS exam, that helps students to survive in English or English-speaking universities. And one thing, of course, that many students have to do, particularly if they study science, is to be able to describe diagrams, graphs in English. So I think this is maybe not useful for all of our students and is maybe not the most important life skill, but we've seen already that numeracy should be included somehow. If you look at Gateway 2nd edition, you will see that occasionally we work on statistics and diagrams and graphs. Money and finance, very important. So do students know how to look after their money? Are they aware of the power of advertising? Do they know how to make a budget? Again, we do these things at a very simple, practical level. We're not teaching economics, but we're teaching very simple concepts about looking after your money. And finally, and this is not always included, but I personally feel very strongly that art, culture, literature should also be included in life skills, because they are also part of, we said well-being, personal well-being. We are not just robots. We also need to be able to appreciate culture, to appreciate art, and to enjoy reading for pleasure. Because I love reading, I think it's also important that most people also enjoy reading and picking up a book. Now, we're going to do a little quiz, okay? So I'm going to ask you some questions, and we're going to see how we talk about these things in Gateway 2nd edition. Now, what percentage of people throw away food they buy with buy one, get one free offers? Now, this is a very difficult question. I know that you cannot give me a definite answer, but you can have a guess, okay? Have a guess. Buy one, get one free. Everybody knows this concept, yeah? You go to the supermarket and you buy one packet of cornflakes and then you get another one free. Now, you're putting quite high numbers. Somebody has actually got the answer almost exactly right. Generally, you're going quite high, but I'll talk about why maybe that's also a bad thing, that it's not so high. Let's have a look, okay? The answer is 30%, which somebody has written down. Yeah, Yekaterina has 30%. Now, that means that 30% of people who buy this special offer, they throw it away afterwards, which is really quite bad because it's a waste of food. The other difficulty is that 70% don't throw it away, but that means that maybe they are consuming things that they never really wanted or never really needed. So it's not very high, but it means that maybe it's one reason why in the UK people consume so much is because they encourage us to consume so much. Can you type in what area of life or life skills is this looking at? What is this area? What would you say? What are we studying here? Eating habits, definitely, and money, environment, budget. Yes, I agree. It's more than one. I've put down money and finance, but I agree. I think it's also connected with eating habits and also the environment, definitely. So it studies different life skills, in particular money and finance. Now, what we do in Gateway 2nd edition, we have this spread here. And this is about selling techniques. And I suppose that you know that adolescents, teenagers, are the area of a different age that most people concentrate on to get them to spend money. Because teenagers often have money, but they don't always think about spending their money sensibly, okay? So what we've got on these pages is small text. You can see them at the bottom, buy one, get one free, drip pricing and baiting, okay? And we simply teach them the concept of these different advertising selling techniques. The idea is that we're making the students aware of these possible problems, okay? For example, drip pricing is a good example. I'm not sure if everybody knows drip pricing. Maybe you don't know the expression, but I'm sure you know what it is. Drip pricing is when you see the price of a product or a service. For example, maybe you see a flight and it says that the flight from London to Paris is only 30 euros. But when you start to book the ticket, you realize that you have to spend maybe 20 euros to book a seat. You need to spend 15 euros to send your bag. In the end, the price, it's called drip pricing because drip, 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 the price gets bigger, bigger, bigger. And of course, this is a typical way that the students can be persuaded to spend their money, because at first something looks cheap and then afterwards it becomes more and more expensive. By the way, Ala's asking if she can have the presentation. What you can have is this talk is being recorded and you can get the presentation by watching the presentation again. I'm sure we'll be giving information about where you can find the recording of this presentation later, okay? Now, that's one area of life then that I think we need to teach our students about, okay? To think about advertising, selling, and being careful with our money. Now, I've got another question for you, okay? My next question. How many minutes of moderate sport or physical exercise does the World Health Organization recommend teachers to do minimum every day? Lubika says 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15. Mikhaila has the answer. I couldn't see your surname, Mikhaila, but it's going very quickly. We've got, most people are going under. Andrea Budinska has the correct answer. The correct answer is 60 minutes, okay? 1 hour. 1 hour of physical exercise every day. Now, 1 hour does not mean just sport. It could be walking to school, okay? It could be cycling to school. It could be walking around the house cleaning. So it's not just doing sport, but it's a lot of time. And I think many of our students, if they live close to their school or if their parents drive them to school, then they will spend less than 60 minutes each day. Now, what area of life or life skills are we looking at? Healthcare. Health. Exactly, yes, health. Physical well-being, that's exactly what I have here. Physical well-being. We're getting our students to think about looking after themselves. Now again, in Gateway, we have a spread which is about designing a fitness program, okay? And I think here what we've got is the idea of different types of sport and different ways of looking after yourself. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, we have a life task. And the life task, I think, is really useful because it's getting the students to design a timetable for the week. They design a timetable and they write down for every day what do they usually do in terms of physical education, exercise. How much do they do? How long do they spend doing it? If they don't spend 60 minutes, then they work with their partner, or they could work even with the PE teacher at your school. And this is one thing that I often mention with life skills, is I think it's very important for life skills if we include teachers from other departments, because we're making a connection between English and the curriculum, English and the world outside the classroom. And I think this is really useful. Now, if the students has designed a timetable to find 60 minutes of sport every day, and they're doing this in English, then I think we're doing two really useful things at the same time, okay? I love the expression in English, killing two birds with one stone. Yurai has mentioned CLIL. Yes, this is very much the idea too. Where I work in Spain, in Madrid, the CLIL project in Spain has made a big difference to the language level of the students. The idea is that we're not just teaching English in isolation, we are teaching English as part of the whole curriculum. And this links back to what I said about life skills, that really what we're doing is English is a horizontal subject. English is not just English. English is part of other subjects and other areas of life. And I think that's a really powerful message for all of our students. So even if your teacher doesn't know, your PE teacher, even if they don't know English, it doesn't matter because we're making links between what we teach and what other teachers are teaching, okay? And I'm sure your PE teacher will also be very happy. Right, now another question for you. In the United States, what percentage of cases has a company decided not to give somebody a job after looking at their social networking profile? So, for example, if they're looking at their Facebook, what sort of percentage do you think? Okay, I'm going to give you the answer quickly. It's difficult to predict. We've got all sorts of good predictions. The answer is 43, which I think is quite high. I mean, it's nearly 50%. When a young person tries to apply for a job, the usual thing in America and in Britain is that the company will quickly Google you, they will search for you, and they will find out what you've said. And this is important then, because if what you've put is negative, then it could it could create problems for getting a job. The opposite also happens, okay? If what you write is good, then you also have a better chance of getting a job. This is, again, from Gateway 2nd edition. We're looking at the repercussions of what happens if you post good or bad things on Facebook. Somebody said that that's not honest. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I think actually, I think that the future is going to be difficult for our teenage students because people will be looking at these things more and more. And I think the thing about teenagers is they know about technology, but sometimes they're not really aware that what they're doing is putting things onto the internet that then are not used in a very powerful way. And I'm going to give you a funny example now, actually. It's funny, but it wasn't very funny for the person involved, okay? Have a look at this. This is an email message. You can find this on the internet. It's a real message. It's a young worker called Kevin. He sends an email to his boss, or his bosses, Paul and Jill, okay? I just wanted to let you know that I will not be able to come into work tomorrow. Something came up at home and I had to go to New York this morning for the next couple of days. I apologize for the delayed notice. So he sent a very polite message to his bosses. So that looks like it's good. He sent this email. Now, if you look, Kevin is obviously in North America. And if you look, the date is October the 31st. Now, can anybody tell me what happens on October the 31st in the United States? I'm sure you know. Halloween. That's right, Ludmilla. Halloween, okay. Now, what happened was that Kevin went to New York. He missed work. Of course, his bosses thought he went to New York maybe because somebody in his family was ill or he had a very serious reason for going. Now, Kevin was young, and this is the picture that Kevin posted on Facebook the next day. This is Kevin, okay? Now, of course, Kevin's bosses were not stupid. They saw the link to this picture on social media, and of course, the next day, exactly, stupid. I think that is the word that we would describe it. But again, some of my students, I think, would just not think about this. They would just put the picture up. They would think it's funny. Now, of course, the next day, Kevin got an email. Well, Catherine has said I would fire him. Catherine, that's exactly what happened, okay? So we've got this message. Kevin, thanks for letting us know. Hope everything is okay in New York. Cool wand. But, of course, in fact, the next day, Kevin lost his job. Now, I think that this is a really useful thing to be talking about with our students, because these are situations that our students could be in. Our students are young, and it is true that teenagers don't often think about the negative consequences of what they're doing. And also, when we were younger, we didn't have to live with these things which were recorded on the internet and which can be used against us. So I think it's very useful, again, if in English classes we are teaching these things. Very easy to teach and very useful to teach. And I think our students will find this interesting, and they will also find it useful. Okay, my last quiz question at the moment. What is the very first thing you should do at the scene of an accident like this, and why? What do you think? What should you do? If you saw this in the kitchen in your home, what should you do? Right, now, of those first three answers, one is right and the others are not quite right. Actually, right. Now, I'm going to show you the answer. The answer is exactly according to the Red Cross. Check if you are in danger, okay? So before you check if the person is okay, what you should do is check if you are any immediate danger. This is because if something happens to you, you cannot help them. So if you run to help, maybe you slip on the water on the floor. You can see that there is a knife. You can see that there is a pan with hot water. So the very first thing that you should do in an emergency situation is look around you and check that you are safe. If you are safe, then you can do the things that you're suggesting, which is to check if the person is breathing. You could call 911 or whatever number you need to call. But the very first thing you do is to check. Gulsanite, sorry, I can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry. It's like on the plane. You're exactly right. If you have been on an aeroplane, when they explain the mask, they will always explain that if you have a child, you should always look after yourself first. First, you put on the mask for you, and then you help your child. Because first of all, you need to be in good situation, good condition to help other people. Okay, so it is actually useful to know, and I didn't have any idea. I didn't have an idea that that was the case, but I think it's useful. Okay. Now, obviously, that's talking about safety. That's talking about physical well-being. And I think it's useful to think about even simple questions of first aid. And in Gateway 2nd edition, we have this lesson where I learned, for example, the questions that they will ask you. When you ring 911, do you know exactly what the questions are that they will ask you? And would you be ready to answer? And of course, we're practicing here being ready to answer in English. Okay, so these things are very practical and they are about real life. And maybe we do this with our students and it's not useful today, but it could be useful to them in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. So I think we're teaching them useful things to think about. Right now, talking about the first aid and Red Cross, one thing that I want to advise you about is that the great thing about life skills is that many different organizations have free teaching resources, and these are available, very easy to get. Okay, you can watch these again and sort of make a note of them, but we've got the Red Cross, we've got the British Heart Foundation, we've got the World Health Organization, and then Barclays Life Skills. These are free materials that are very, very interesting. They're all in English. Sometimes the English will be a little bit difficult and you might need to simplify. Okay, the Barclays Life Skills, as far as I know, the last time I looked, is free. They have very good videos. Okay, you have to register, but they are free. And in many of the other addresses that you've got there, they give you free posters for your classroom wall in English, which is great. Now, I want you to have a look at one little quiz. We're going to do this quite quickly, okay? This is a funny quiz, which is not mine, okay? This was designed and written by the Red Cross, but I think it's really useful because it's funny and we can do some useful language work. Let's have a look at this. I'm going to ask you some questions. They're all very easy, okay? They're quite funny. Have a look at this, okay? I've got some questions for you, okay? What does this sign mean? Does it mean clap here? Safety gloves must be worn? Or odd gloves and other lost property? A, B, or C? B. Very easy, okay? So it is actually B, okay? The quiz is quite funny. Some of the options are quite funny. Let's have a look at the next question, okay? Question number 2. What does this sign mean? A. Do not extinguish with water. B. Do not light a fire. If you do, we'll put it out. Or C. Bucket loads of barbecue sauce available. Yeah, you've all got the answer already. A. Pretty easy, yeah? But it's good fun also. Funny questions. Next question. Number 3. What does this sign mean? Please walk with 1 foot on the pavement and 1 in the gutter. Dancing on stairs is prohibited. Warning, drop. That's pretty easy, yeah? That's C. Next one. What does this sign mean? People wearing white will be split down the middle. Iron flat. Safety overalls must be worn. The answer is C, correct. Number 5. You're doing very well. What does this sign mean? Broken arrows likely? Danger electricity? Or is it take a sharp left, then a sharp right? Okay, it's B, but I think C is the funniest. C is the funniest, but B is the correct answer. And then the last question, what does this sign mean? Extreme caution, Christmas is coming. Warning, low temperature. Crystals must be worn beyond this point. A is very funny, but of course the correct answer is C. Oh, C, no, sorry. The correct answer is B. Yeah? Right, now this is very funny, but there is then a serious question. It's asking about the shape and design of these different signs. Does anybody know the answer here? Number 1, 2, 3. Warning sign. Is it A, B, or C? A warning sign. What shape is it and what color is it? Yeah, most of you are getting the correct answer. It's C, okay? Triangular, black, and yellow. What about number 2? Is it A, B, or C? Number 2. Mikhailo is very fast. It is actually A. That's very good. A. And that means that obviously number 3 is C. Okay, now that was not as easy as the first part of the quiz, okay? And it's getting the students to think about something which is important. When they see a sign, do they know what type of sign it is? One thing that I want to mention here is when you talk about things that must be done, things that should be done, or things that you mustn't do, what area of English could we teach when we do this exercise? Any ideas? Modal verbs, absolutely. You're very good today. You always get the correct answer. Brilliant. Modal verbs, okay? So we've got must, should, can't, mustn't. Very, very useful. So if you want to, this depends on you. If you want to, you could use this quiz to teach some very useful English and also to think about some very useful life skills. Okay, so both things. 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, now the quiz continues with asking the students if these things are warning, mandatory, or not allowed. So we're getting the students to think about the concept. And finally, a lovely exercise that your students, I'm sure, would enjoy doing is that they create signs for these different things. And they create the sign with the correct shape. Is it a triangle? Is it a circle? Is it blue? Is it yellow? Is it mandatory or is it a warning? Okay, so I think you've seen that the material is really nice. You can find that on the Red Cross website. You can find it free. Sometimes the language will need to be simplified because this is for English school children, okay? So sometimes you might need to teach some extra vocabulary, but I think that you could get some really useful language work from this exercise, okay? Useful in terms of English, useful in terms of life skills. Okay, we're coming to the end of the session. We haven't talked about negative things about life skills, and I think we should talk just quickly because not everything about life skills is maybe perfect. So maybe you are also thinking about some criticisms that we could make. For example, you could say that life skills are very useful, but your students won't do them. They just won't bother. Okay, so you can teach them about, for example, first aid, but maybe they will refuse to learn it. Do you agree or disagree with that? Maybe your students don't care about some of these life skills. Knowledge is power. Good, I agree with that very much. I think that really, that generally, there is a question as teachers, isn't there? This is something that I feel strongly about. In my classes, I can talk about the ecology and the environment, and all of my students say, yes, it's important to look after the environment. And then I walk out into the playground and it looks like this. They throw bottles on the floor, they throw packets of biscuits, they put the paper on the floor, and it all looks a mess. And sometimes I get a little bit depressed because I think that students are not doing what they should be doing. But I think this is true for everything as a teacher. Sometimes we feel bad as teachers because we feel our students are not paying attention to us. Now, we have an expression in English. This is a great expression, okay? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I think this is very true as teachers. We can try to get our students to learn things, but we can't force them. At the end of the day, we cannot make our students do things, okay? But I was reading a book about education, and I love this quotation, okay? This is a very interesting quotation. This is from the headmaster of Eton School, okay? And he says, okay, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But it says that at its simplest, schools give young people a place at the water's edge. A horse may not choose to drink if it is led to water, but it cannot drink at all if the water is not there. What is Mr. Little saying? He is saying that we have to try, because if we don't try to teach these things to our students, nobody will. Maybe sometimes we feel depressed because they don't do these things, but our job as teachers, our mission, our aim is to keep on trying, even when students don't pay attention. And I think that's a great way to think about our profession, that we are the people who provide water for our students. Okay? Oh yeah, sorry, there's a typo. Margita, that's very good. You've spotted my typo, okay? There are 3 N's in cannot. Yeah, I got carried away. I got too excited. I think this is a very interesting quotation, and I think it makes me feel better when my students don't pay attention to me. Okay? Now, another question. I don't want to make my students talk about incredibly personal or sensitive issues. They find it difficult to talk about them, or at least to talk about them seriously, and even more so in a foreign language. Do you agree or disagree with this? Agree? Agree? Right, a lot of people are agreeing, and I will tell you what I think. I agree. I agree. You will notice that I talked about PSHE education. What I didn't tell you is that in the UK, PSHE education includes sex education, drugs, and anorexia. Now, I think that these things are very important questions for teenagers. They are very, very important. I think that they are so important that I think if you want to discuss them properly, you should discuss in the student's own language. These are very serious issues, and I personally think that it's difficult for students to do this well and seriously in a foreign language. Diana, that's a good point, asking your students. And obviously you know your students, and it's up to you to decide what you can. In Gateway, for example, I didn't want to include talking about sex education or drugs or anorexia, because I feel that these are things that you have to know your students very well, and you need to be able to discuss them in detail, and that often means in their own language, okay? So personally, and this is only my personal opinion, you can all do what you like, obviously, it's a free world. Personally, I don't feel comfortable doing it in English. That's my opinion. Schools shouldn't just be obsessed with making students employable. We've talked about getting jobs. Do you agree or disagree with that? It depends. You agree? I personally think, I've mentioned a few times that companies are very obsessed with our students being employable. My own feeling is that we need to think about the students' well-being, about the students' personal fulfillment. And I think that just preparing students for the world of work is not necessarily our mission. I think our mission is to help create complete, well-rounded, happy teenage students. And that's why, for example, in Gateway, I include things like reading for pleasure, why I include things like art, appreciating art, because I think that we shouldn't just be obsessed with creating the world of work. And actually, Maria, I also agree that we shouldn't be obsessed with just preparing them for exams. So I'm saying that it's important to prepare students for exams. It's important to prepare students for the world of work, but I would like to think that what I'm doing in my classes and also in Gateway is also preparing them for other things too. We want the complete person. That includes physical well-being, it includes confidence, it includes feeling good, it includes art and literature, okay? And exams are important, and the world of work is very important, but I think that there's other things too, okay? So we're not just preparing, I think, in my opinion, workers. Yeah? Right, now, another last point. I'm an English teacher, not a life skills teacher. I should be teaching vocabulary and grammar and stuff. Do you agree or disagree? Disagree. Right. I think you can imagine what I feel. I think that we are teachers of grammar, we are teachers of vocabulary, but I think that we, again, need to think about the student as a whole person, okay? I personally think that we're looking after them both. And exactly as Michaela has said, I think we should teach them both, okay? And I think that that's what we should be doing. One thing that I think we need to remember, students learn not just from what we teach, but how we teach it. And I think that that's maybe the most important message sometimes too, is that, for example, if we want to teach respect, patience, and tolerance, then as a teacher and as an adult, we also need to be respectful, patient, and tolerant. And if you go into your lessons trying to teach life skills and you look like this teacher here, you're going to do a very bad job because you're giving a bad example. And every day when we walk into our classes, we are teaching life skills by being a model. Our students look at us like their parents, as adults, as responsible adults. As Lydia says, sometimes they copy the teacher as a person. I think that happens a lot. And I think that if you're shouting at your students, if you don't listen to them, then you're not really going to teach values. We talk a lot today about values education as well as life skills. And to teach values, we need to show a good example, in my opinion. Sometimes it's easier said than done, but we should try. Right, okay, we're going to finish with some funny jokes here. I always like to finish with some funny things, some mistakes that students make, okay, or funny things they say. Name 6 animals which live in the Arctic, okay? We need to know about the world around them. Can you name 6 animals which live in the Arctic? People usually say the same animals. Which animals can you think of? Penguins. Actually, penguins don't live in the Arctic. Polar bears, yes. Polar bears, yes, but penguins are in the Antarctic. Okay, this student wrote 2 polar bears, 4 seals, because he couldn't think of anything else, okay? So that's quite funny. I like that, yeah? We can all think of bears. It's interesting because you're all saying bears and seals, but most people don't think of anything after bears and seals. So he wrote 2 polar bears, 4 seals. That's nice, okay? Here's another one. Deserts can be hot or cold. Name a hot desert and a cold desert. Okay, obviously the word desert is similar to another word in English. This student has written hot desert apple crumble with custard, cold desert jelly and ice cream. Okay, so obviously this is not desert, this is dessert, but the student has made quite a funny mistake. That's quite nice, I think. Draw a plant cell and identify its most important parts. And this is a plant cell, okay? This is not a plant cell like in biology classes, but it's quite a nice picture. The most important things are, of course, the iron bars and no windows. I love that picture. I think that's a great picture. Look how sad our flower is. Very, very sad. And oh yes, we've got 2 more. Define capital punishment. When you get in trouble for not putting a capital letter at the start of a sentence. Okay, so that could be quite funny in English classes if you're talking about capital punishment. And my last one, okay, what ended in 1896? So a history question. What ended in 1896? Exactly, Lubika has the right answer. It was actually 1895. Okay, that's pretty good too. Okay, I love our students, how they're very creative with their answers. Okay, I've taken a bit longer than I expected. I don't know if anybody has any questions. It might be difficult to ask questions now because we really don't have much time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've loved your participation, by the way. I've never stopped reading your comments, and there's been some great comments, some great answers, as always. Perfect answers, in fact. So it's been great watching your chat box. Thanks so much. I tell you what, if anybody has any questions, the best way to contact me is the Gateway Facebook page. Is anybody on the Macmillan Gateway Facebook page? I'm sure some of you are, okay? We have over 5,000 teachers from all around the world, particularly from Central and Eastern Europe. I've been to many of your countries many times, and I know that lots of people try and follow that page. I always answer to everything personally there, so it's great to stay in touch. If you do have a question about this webinar, then please do send me a message and I will answer you. I would love to be coming to visit your countries, but I'm afraid I won't be traveling for a while. But it's been a real pleasure sharing this hour with you. It seems to have gone very quickly. I hope you've enjoyed it. It looks like you have. It's been great. Right, I'm going to pass to the next slide. On the next slide, the last slide, you have a link to the certificate, okay, which you can download, okay? This link here, if you click on that link, you should get a certificate of attendance, which you can download and you can print out. It's been a real massive pleasure for me, honestly. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great being with you. I'm going to be switching off in a second after saying goodbye to my friend Dana.
There are no
Dana, I'm going to hand over to you.
And
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I would love to be coming
tomorrow.
Have a nice
evening or the rest of the week. Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
As I say, if anybody wants to contact me, then please do it. It's in Facebook. Just put Macmillan Gateway and you'll find it very easily.